Go on then, Abby. Morning. Oh, this is not right. What's going on here? It's not the weather I was hoping for. Lucky this camera's waterproof. Basically, this is going to be a bit of a spacey video, which so basically the way I'm doing it with YouTube at the moment is provided I've done the last video and edited it and got it up, if there's something I want to talk about, then I grab the camera and just sort of try and fit it in around the day. So that's what I'm doing. And today I've been following the saga of Starliner, let's put it that way. And I thought perhaps I should just make a bit of a video. I mean, what is wrong with Boeing? Unbelievable. We're just learning that the Starliner spacecraft is unable to autonomously undock from the ISS. Despite the fact it did that on previous flights, they decided to remove that option from the software on this one. Quick recap of the situation. In a nutshell, Starliner is way behind Crew Dragon from a schedule point of view. Fair number of delays, and Boeing don't seem to be able to get their act together at all, is the way I would describe it. 2 American astronauts were launched to the ISS on their first crewed test flight before hopefully it was going to become operational, although something tells me that's not going to happen for a little while. And on the way up there were some issues. Well, there were some issues on the ground as well, helium leaks and the such like. And then when they tried to approach the ISS, they had some thrusters that failed to work, and then some of them are now working again and one of them isn't, and the helium leak's still there, but apparently it's stable. And if you're wondering why they want helium, helium is not a propellant. They're using it to keep the tanks pressurized so that the fuel that flows into the little sort of pressure fed orbital maneuvering thrusters and the other sort of thrusters that keep the craft pointed where they want it to be in space, those thrusters basically are just pressure fed, which means that the fuel's got to get there at the right pressure or they won't work properly. So to keep that pressure constant as you use fuel, you replace the fuel that you've used with helium and it leaking. So that's not good. And NASA is finding it very difficult to quantify the risk of a return journey using Starliner. They've test fired the thrusters on the ground, you know, from sort of old stock, new stock, I don't know, who knows with Boeing. I mean, there aren't any words to really describe it. It's been such a mess. And for all this time, people have been saying, oh, we think SpaceX might have to go rescue them with a Crew Dragon. And I have never thought that was actually likely. I have to admit, despite the fact that ever since Starliner first had trouble getting to the International Space Station, there've been sort of people who've said, oh, SpaceX are going to have to go rescue the 2 American astronauts. And I've never been in the camp of thinking there was any chance of that, quite honestly, because there are loads of risks associated with taking a Crew Dragon up there. Loads of risks, because it wasn't what was planned. And SpaceX is such a finely tuned thing that you can have a crash because you've got a different kind of ballpoint pen on the thing, you know, more or less. I mean, slight variations in weight, slight variations in flight plan. Everything that happens in space gets tested first, because when it goes wrong, it goes badly wrong. That said, I'm starting to think it might actually happen. So for one thing, SpaceX has been paid a couple of $100 million to look at the feasibility of doing a rescue missions, which I think, if you ask NASA, that isn't specifically because of the current Starliner situation. It's just because it's generally quite a good idea to know what your rescue options are. And quite honestly, it's amazing because in the past there have never been any rescue mission, any rescue possibilities. If you were stuck in space, you were stuck. However, SpaceX launch with such frequency and they have so much hardware on hand thanks to reusability, I think it actually is feasible now. But there's still loads of risks associated, and honestly I would still, even at this point, be quite surprised if NASA did end up thinking, yes, it needs to be a rescue mission with SpaceX. However, learning that they've sent up a space capsule that lacks the software necessary to autonomously fly back on its own is honestly, it's symptomatic of the fact that Boeing can't seem to do a single damn thing right. And on top of that, it appears to be, I mean, I don't understand. This part of the vehicle, it's supposed to be able to fly about autonomously, and the previous test vehicles could. So why have they left it out all of a sudden? I mean, there's literally no words to describe the mess that's going on at Boeing at the moment. And the fact that they're still at the International Space Station, now we're at like 60 days or something, and originally the batteries on the Starliner were only rated for 45 days, although they've said, oh, we think they'll last longer. And honestly, they'll probably last much longer with no risk to the crew. I don't think battery longevity is going to be the issue that sinks the Starliner. What worries me is, how was it allowed to fly in the first place with thrusters that don't work properly and half the software not installed? Is nobody at NASA checking what they're doing? Because clearly they should be. I have no words to describe how wholly unsuited to spaceflight Boeing appears to be. And I feel quite sorry for Butch and Sonny, and I hope they get home safely. And if I were them, I wouldn't want to be on the Starliner. I mean, let's say it does manage to undock successfully and the thrusters work. With the kind of attitude that Boeing appears to have, what if there's a problem with the parachutes? There's obviously a systemic issue at Boeing when it comes to safety. You know, there must be somebody whose job title is take something safe, try and cut 5% of the cost and make it unsafe. Because whoever that person is, they're doing a fantastic job. You know, whether it's aircraft or spacecraft, they do not seem to be able to make things that work properly. I feel sorry for the managers at NASA mainly because, you know, they've got a really tough decision to make. If they get the spacecraft to undock and it comes back without the crew and it comes back fine, then everyone will be like, well, why didn't you just send it back with the crew, you idiot? Look at the trouble you've caused. And if it doesn't, I mean, the whole point was they wanted two systems that work. And as it stands, they've got one system that works and one system that, quite honestly, I wouldn't risk Albie on it. Although I'm sure you'd love to go to space, wouldn't you, Albie? It's been quite the show to watch, this one, I've got to say. And the current plan, as I understand it, is to push the Crew 9 launch, which was supposed to be middle of August, 18th of August, which is amazing, by the way, that SpaceX have managed to get back to fully certified flight so quickly after having that upper stage failure in July, like literally 3 weeks ago, more or less. But they're back at flight. You know, I don't think NASA's actually signed off on Crew yet, but the fact that SpaceX has already launched, I think it's 4 Falcon 9s, or is it 5 now, since fixing the issue, you know, it gives you some idea that actually whatever they've done is fine and working without any issue. So I would imagine that they'll get signed off as soon as they need to go, if they haven't already. Anyway, so they're pushing that flight back to, I think, the 24th of September. And I have heard just now that the reason is because, or possibly is because, it would take up to 4 weeks to do the non-trivial process of adding to the software so that it can actually autonomously fly back, for the Starliner I mean, what are they doing? Are they going to manually put the code in line by line? Because I don't see how non-trivial and takes up to 4 weeks could be. I mean, that's not like, even my phone doesn't take 4 weeks to update. So it's making me think perhaps that is it. Maybe they have decided that, and I think basically there is a lot of overexcitement on the internet. And I think the big problem here is not whether Starliner would be safe or not. I think the big problem that NASA has with Boeing and with Starliner at the moment is they're unable to quantify the risk. So in order to conduct space flight, I think you're supposed to have no more than a 1 in 207 chance of failure. It's something like that. So the chances are small, but they're certainly not negligible. The problem is that although NASA thinks they're probably around that sort of point, or maybe less, or maybe more, they're not quite sure, and they can't work out how to quantify that risk accurately while Starliner's in space. And the reason why it stayed in space for so long to begin with is actually also because of a design decision that Boeing made, which is that when they return with the capsule, it will separate from its service module, and unlike Crew Dragon, where the service module is also known as the trunk, it's basically just solar panels and a radiator, things that will not survive re-entry anyway. There's just no way that a ballistic return capsule is going to be able to protect radiators and solar panels on its surface from the heat of re-entry. It's just not going to happen. So they dump those, but you still get back everything else, all the fuel tanks, all of the thrusters, because Crew Dragon is pretty darn reusable as these things go. Starliner, however, it dumps 60% of the vehicle that burns up in the atmosphere. So if they returned the crew after 10 days, just took the risk and went with it, then they'd never actually know what was going on with the thrusters. They would have had no opportunity to test them on the ground or see what the situation was back on planet Earth, because they'd have burnt up on re-entry. So yeah, it's an interesting little design decision there. Also, I don't think NASA actually bothers to give the Starliner names. They don't. I don't think Butchum and Sunny have given their capsule a name. I'm not aware. Maybe they have, but I tell you what, I'll eat my hat if that thing ever flies again. I think what they're suspecting the problem is that the housings for the thrusters are building up heat with repeated short firings, and that's causing the thrusters to then sort of malfunction. Which, I mean, do they not test these things? Do they not model them? What? I mean, unbelievable. Anyway, that's all the time I've got for today. Obviously, I hope the American astronauts get home safely. Oh, come here, Albie. Good boy. There you go. There you go. Good boy. Yeah, I hope they get home safely, and, you know, whether it's on Crew Dragon or Starliner. One thing's for sure though, Starliner still needs work, and NASA knows it, which is why they have pushed the first operational launch out from, I think it was going to be in February, and now it's going to be in August next year, if then. To be honest, I think Starliner is getting pretty close to being something that they should just cancel. It's been a fairly catastrophic mess. I just hope it doesn't turn into an actual catastrophe rather than just one that's a financial catastrophe for Boeing and a lot of headache for everyone else. We'll have to see. The rescue mission has got, you know, it's not trivial. Apparently SpaceX do have 2 suits that would fit, but they'll have to send them up. Then the question is, do they put an extra couple of seats in a Dragon, or do they just go up with only 2 crew? I think that only 2 crew going up is much more likely, rather than fly the craft in a configuration it's never been flown before on a rescue mission. I don't think that's going to happen, but we will have to see. It's an interesting one to watch, and it certainly isn't good for Boeing, and I struggle to understand how Boeing has allowed this to happen. That's it. I'm home now, so I need to go and crack on for the day. But I just wanted to have a little bit of a what are Boeing doing rant. So this was it. I hope you've enjoyed today's vlog post. If you have, remember to leave a like and share it and subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Instagram and X if you like, links in the description. I want to say a big thank you to my Patreon supporters because you guys are awesome. And if you're looking for a way to potentially support the channel, it doesn't cost you anything, and you would like to swap your energy to Octopus, who I think are great, then I have an Octopus Referral link, which is also in the description, and then we get to share £100 sign-on bonus, which I think is pretty awesome. Anyway, take care, and I'll see you in the next post. Bye.